Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to an amazing presentation in our little convergence room for love, unity, and planetary stewardship. Today's session is Sustainable and Supportive Shelter for Peace, Harmony, and Healing with Dr. Will Tuttle and Madeleine Tuttle. So, Will and Madeleine, take it away.
Great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks so much, Charles. And thanks everyone for joining us on this Peace Week, where we're focusing every day on a different subject. A few days ago, I know on Monday it was food. We have air and water, and today is shelter. And sustainable shelter for harmony, peace, and healing is what we're talking about. And we have a lot to talk about. Madeleine is a real dyed in the wool, literally, gardener. And I think maybe we should start talking about the garden, because I think, we have the home, and in our society, people usually go out to the store to buy food. And I think that's, of course, that's fine. But the more we can begin to integrate growing our own food in whatever way we can, even if it's just sprouts on the counter, to begin to start recycling, compost, and so forth, making a connection with nature. So we thought it would be good to start talking a little bit, especially about the garden and what we've been doing there, what we've been learning over the last few years. So, yeah.
Yeah. Hi. The garden, that's really, it's a beautiful name, the garden, and it's very sacred. All the plants in there, they are alive. And if I move through the garden, I can feel it's living, and it's so good for the soul. It's very healing. Whatever problem one has or concerns, going to the garden and just maybe have a chair out there, a bench, or I have a hammock swing, which is really nice to swing in there and overlook the garden and see how every plant is doing, all the trees, and I get some ideas and can take care very effectively to the plants and the trees. And we have lots of trees. We have about 70 fruit and nut trees, and lots of greeneries like to eat, like lots of peppermints and all kinds of different, there are so many, and kale and Swiss chard and all herbs you can think of. I am really into herbs. We have in the morning, we have already an herbal green smoothie, which is really a beautiful bottom for, we say this in Switzerland, creating a good bottom for the day. And so we have the green smoothie, and we have, of course, a video online with that whole recipe and how to do it. And so we already start ingesting these beautiful holy energies in the morning early.
Well, I'm comforted already, but I'm amazingly hungry now.
Yeah, right. Our mouths are watering. Yeah, no, and I just want to add a couple of things. Madeleine, like she said, she goes out into the garden and listens, and I think that's an important part. The idea we can listen and see if any of the trees or the plants. We have 6 vegetable beds. We had 1, then we had 2, then we had 3. We sort of every year we add another vegetable bed. And anyway, so to kind of listen to see if there's any plants that are calling and would like water or attention or some minerals or something. And so it's becomes kind of a part. It's like an extended family is the food. And there's an old wisdom, I think, really in understanding, which is lost in our society, is that especially if we grow our own food, the plants will begin over the years to know us, because we're giving our attention to them and communicating with them. And there's things you can do also, like we always like all of the gray water in the entire house, we have plumbed so that it goes into a tank that we then, Madeline, about once every 5 days or
Yeah.
so, she waters the whole garden with our water from our washing our hands and this and that. So we're always connecting with the garden that way. And another thing, I know it sounds a little strange in our society, but
Mm.
but in Sweden and really in Europe and in general, this is an old wisdom that there's something called liquid gold. They call it liquid gold.
Shivambu.
Shivambu. Yeah, right. In Sanskrit, it's Shivambu. But it's basically our human urine. And that we were kind of disgusted about that. But really, it's so good for the garden. It's full of nitrogen. And it's really makes the plants celebrate. They love it. And it's got nitrogen. It's also got potassium and phosphorus as well, but especially rich in nitrogen, which is the main thing that plants need to grow their leaves. It's like where we get our protein is, we're eating, if we're a vegetarian, we're vegans. So we've been vegans for a decade, 40 years. So when we grow plants with our own information, because the whole idea in many ways is that this earth and life here, it's not just matter. Really, there's consciousness that streams through everything. Consciousness lives in everything. And things are not things. Things are really consciousness, actually. So the whole idea is to awaken out of and question really the underlying mentality of materialism that sees everything more or less as dead matter, and to see the living force. That's why when Madeline goes out, she's communicating with the plants, and then we're communicating with them because they get watered with all of our water, including the liquid gold, and they love that. And then also the compost and everything and she makes compost tea, which is, you want to say how you make the
Yeah.
compost tea? That's
Yeah,
kind of a
it's
nice
actually
important part.
taking, there is also a video you can watch. It's taking herbs like comfrey or what is it? The other one.
Yeah.
Yeah, just any green
Borage.
borage is really great too. Something kind of a meaty herb, which you put into the water and let it sit, but stir it every day a couple of times for maybe 3, 4, 5 days. And then you have the tea, the compost tea. And then one dilutes it and gives it to the plants, and they really love it. So one gives actually back to the plants of what one takes. One gives always back.
Right. There's a lot you can learn, actually. And we go around, like where we live in Northern California, there are star thistles, which are these thistles that everywhere. And the whole idea is if you just gather the blossoms, they put these yellow flowers out, and you just get a whole bunch of them, just fill up a whole container, and then you put it in water and you soak it, and then you can add a little sugar, and then the sugar digests the nutrients, and then you put that on the plants, and it's full of what are called beneficial bacteria. And so the whole idea really is to just build up the soil and build up the community of life in your yard.
And also these are very old wisdoms. They come, mostly all comes from Asia, and like with the thistles from Korea or other countries in Asia, the liquid gold comes from India. And it gets roots over here now with Sweden doing it like really permanently with all the apartments harvesting the liquid gold. And so we usually just waste very, precious kind of what do you call it?
Nutrients.
Nutrients, yes.
Right. Of course, all these things, the thing to remember in all these things is like everything is interconnected. So like we are very conscious about what we eat. So this is something I guess that we should get into, because we're talking about sustainable shelter and creating a life that's supportive of ourselves and the earth and the community, and everything's interconnected. So that's one of the reasons we don't eat animal-based foods. We're longtime vegans, and quite honestly, we've actually visited slaughterhouses and stockyards and factory farms where these animals are harmed. And quite honestly, I can say, if you wanted to imagine the worst hell on earth, that's it. I mean, these animals are in complete, utter terror and pain and anxiety and fear, and the people in there have to harden their hearts and stab animals. You do not want to spend time there. It's so, I mean, it's so depressing, and for days afterwards, it's this heavy cloud kind of. And so thinking that that's where most of the people in our society are getting their food, out of that hell of misery and violence, and out of that vibration and energy and consciousness of terror and fear and pain, they want to build a temple of joy and freedom and creativity. You know, it's like, it's such a disconnection, and we're so numbed to that. And so contrasting that to what Madeleine just said, how the most delightful place to be on earth is probably a beautiful organic or veganic, because we don't use any bone meal or blood meal. We don't use any animal manure. It's all plant-based. Everything we do is plant-based, the compost tea and everything. So like a garden like that, or a food forest, you just want to be there. You don't want to run away. And, you know, it's like to think of this, our food comes right out of the earth. It's like love feeding love. And we can live that way, but we've lost the thread, unfortunately, in our society. And we think that somehow that life feeds on death, that we have to kill in order to live. But really, that's not true. It's an old, very toxic story. We can live on life. We can eat living foods, really. I mean, most of the foods we eat are alive. We eat so many, especially the last few months, we've been eating huge amounts of peaches and nectarines and all these, prunes and plums and all these things. And now the persimmons are coming, and the walnuts. And anyway, so we're eating a lot of living food, and then a lot of tomatoes and eggplants and cucumbers and all these. Yeah, they really come. Zucchinis and pretty soon the pumpkins and squashes are coming now also, and all these things, and potatoes and so forth. So there's this idea, we can cook some of it. We cook a lot of it. I'd say it's a good idea to have at least probably half the food you're eating be uncooked, nice and fresh. Like in the morning, we have a smoothie. Madeleine has a great video on making green smoothies. And then I have a video. I have one video in the whole series of Madeleine's Intuitive Kitchen, which is making sprouts. So if you can supplement with sprouts, I think it's a really good idea. It's the technique that we demonstrate. If you just go to Will Tuttle on YouTube, you can see all of Madeleine's Intuitive Kitchen videos. And sprouts are a fantastic food. And we lived in an RV for 17 years. So we couldn't have a garden. We just lived on the road, but we had sprouts. We always had sprouts growing. You just need a jar, and it takes a couple of tablespoons of sprouts, and then you've got fresh greens all the time. And you can sprout all kinds of foods, and both legumes as well as greens and seeds. So it's really a lot to learn. And we go to Hippocrates Institute.
There are actually places where you heal through sprouts. Like Hippocrates has over a dozen of different sprouts for a meal. So you have a nice dressing and eat sprouts. Just sprouts and a few other leaves, and it's healing. It's really the best thing one can do once a year.
Yeah, people come. We go there actually lately every year for about a month and a half to give lectures and concerts of original piano music, and Madeleine plays the flute. But it's wonderful to see all these people coming from all over the United States and Europe and Asia with cancer, with diabetes, with liver disease, kidney disease, obesity, osteoporosis, all the basic diseases that are rampant in our society. And they come there, and the emphasis is on three things, which is really, I think, the core of what we're talking about with healthy healing shelter. Number one is nutrition, really healthy food that's clean. And so eating basically living foods, all sprouts and other green, like peppers and some other, and lots of greens and green juice. And then the second thing is exercise. There's a huge emphasis on rebounders and weightlifting and jogging and all these different things, and lots of exercise, swimming and so forth. And then the third, the most important really, is the mentality or the attitude, to really cultivate a positive attitude, cultivate gratitude, and cultivate a sense of harmony in our relationships with other people, in our relationship with our true nature, taking time for meditation and yoga. These are really the things. And so that's that's in West Palm Beach, Florida, and it's been around for years, but we can take those same principles and bring them right into our own home. That's what we talk about, the idea of a space of love, that we create a space of love. So even though we lived for 17 years in an RV, where we were just traveling, we had this little tiny home on wheels of about 220 square feet. And that's a whole other thing to talk about, which is minimalism, which is really important. And maybe we'll talk about that later, but just the idea of being happy with less, it's really great. But coming back, then we eventually, after 17 years of that, we got this little half acre here in Northern California. And that became like a space of love for us. And I think we can all do that wherever we are, if we're in an apartment or whatever, to create a space of love, which is where we live. And it starts with our consciousness, and then it radiates from there into the space that we're responsible for. Like, we're responsible for this half acre. And so really, we don't have any meat, dairy, eggs, alcohol, really anything, drugs or anything, and like that. And then it's like a sacred space, like a temple, and we even have a temple sign because I was a Zen Buddhist monk. So it's really a temple. And so the whole idea is that our life can be a sacred expression every day. So to start out the day with meditation, and then do things with mindfulness and so forth. It's really not so much what we're doing, it's sort of how we're doing it. And a lot of the emphasis is on keeping everything neat and clean. And I'm very blessed to have to be married to someone from Switzerland, because they they know all about that. Do you want to talk about some of your important points on cleaning? I mean, on substances that we're using for.
Oh yeah, it's very important to
personal care,
everything we buy and consume, use, or wear, to look at the labels, what it is, what's in there, what it's made from, and where it's made, because we don't like to support the slave laborers. So it's good to get natural fibers, organic, and eat.
Look at this.
Yeah, that's natural fiber.
She knits too.
Yeah. And also what one eats, it should be actually clean. It shouldn't be processed. I read a line which I think is really great. Whatever has seen the inside of a factory, we should never eat. So just think of it, how much one eats, which was once in a factory. So our health, our ecological surroundings, everything is very dependent on what we're doing, because we're the only species who destroy the earth. It's not the animals, it's nobody else, it's us. And we're disturbed by it, so we better make some progress in living better, cleaner, and so on. Also, the body lotions, just for women, I say that. Just look what's in there. There is some natural products around. Also, the cleanings. We don't need so many different cleaners. I know they promise you the heaven on earth if you buy this or the other product, because it's so simple. or it just does it all or something, and you don't need that. If you have soda, baking powder, and
Baking soda.
vinegar, baking soda, vinegar, and all these things, or the right cloth, we don't need anything to clean the windows. You just need the right fabric, and then you have shiny,
micro.
the micro. There is a combo. It's like 2 different cloths, and if one use that, one doesn't need any all these products. So it's very easy cleaning if one does first the work and looks at the labels.
Yeah, what was the name of that? We saw that documentary film. I think it's called Stink. Yeah, and it basically
That's a good
it's
one.
just an important wake-up call. I'll just say briefly, the fact is, really quite honestly, that there are literally no rules protecting us as consumers from chemicals that are used in cleaners or body care products or even clothing when it has anything to do with the chemicals that they use for fragrance or for flame retardants or all these different things. And in fact, the word fragrance, if you see that in a detergent or in anything, that's just a placeholder, and it could be 10 or 20 or even 100 chemicals. They don't have to say anything. They can put all kinds of chemicals in and just say fragrance. The law is passed that there's no liability for companies to do that. So a lot of these chemicals are really carcinogenic. And the United States is really one of the only countries in the world. I mean, compared to Europe, it's much looser. Europe doesn't allow that. So we have to understand really clearly that we are not protected by government agencies anymore. These government agencies have been captured by these large chemical companies. And so they don't protect us. Even the EPA doesn't protect us anymore.
And the same thing like fragrance for these kind of other things Will is talking. The same thing is flavors in food.
Flavorings.
It's a whole placer.
So
just think of it.
Yeah, right.
Placeholder.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
So that's one of the reasons we've as the years have gone by, we've gotten more and more, I guess the word would be strict in terms of like, we're not going to eat that. Because part of it is whatever we eat goes through us and goes into the garden, right? So it's called, there's a book, I remember reading it back in the 70s or 80s called The Circle of Poison. Everything we consume, if we consume poisons, it goes through us and it's excreted, and it goes back into the water, back into the soil, back into the birds, into the insects, into the fish. And then it goes from them back into the food again, all these. So the whole idea is like, we don't buy anything that's not organic, for example. I mean, we just wouldn't do it. We just don't buy it because we know that if it's not organic, it's been sprayed by the ground has been sprayed virtually all the time now by glyphosate, which is the Monsanto, the Roundup main ingredient. And glyphosate is a broad spectrum antibiotic that really harms our microbiome and makes it difficult for us to digest food. And also it's directly connected to our moods. And a lot of the reasons that people are depressed or anxious or frustrated is because the microbiome is depressed and anxious and frustrated because it's not getting the nutrients that it needs. It's getting a lot of glyphosate, which really harms it. So, the microbiome in our body really thrives on polypeptides, which are the starches that come. Fiber is the greatest thing. The more fiber, the better. And we tend in our society now to be programmed really by these industries. They create foods that are so delicious, but they don't have fiber. They try to melt in your mouth, and they have a lot of fat, sugar, and salt, typically, which are quite addictive. But remember, those foods that are so pleasing to the palate, if our palate gets educated to that, it gets sort of waylaid and really taken off course. It gets kind of hijacked into foods that really are going to cause us not to feel healthy. And the good news is, if we if we just make our mind, it's like mind over body. A lot of people say, "Oh, just listen to your body," and that's not a good idea, right? I mean, if someone wants a cigarette and they say, "Well, they're addicted to cigarettes," it's like, don't listen to your body. you'll keep smoking them. The same thing with the junk food that is everywhere in our society and the ways of living, the idea of comfort, like just be, the idea we want to have a comfortable home. I think that's a dangerous idea, really, because comfort
is a prison.
There it is. It very easily becomes a prison. We want to be comfortable. And that is not a good idea. Same thing with foods. We want foods that are comfort foods. And pretty soon those foods start attacking the integrity of our organs. The saturated fat and cholesterol, the acidifying inflammatory animal proteins, and the chemical the residues of chemical fertilizers and pesticide, herbicides, and fungicides, and the artificial flavorings and colorings, preservatives, all that stuff pervades the foods. And we're not being helped by this. I just read yesterday that the new head of the Biden administration, the administration has a new, it's called the Food Compass, and it ranks all foods from 100 down to 0. Like the healthiest food you should really eat a lot of and really encourage eating, they get 100 or 90 or 80, and the foods that are bad, you get 10 or 20 or 30, and they have a lot of the most toxic foods now listed up in the 80s and 90s, like these processed junk cereals, like Frosted Flakes and Lucky Charms. They're full of chemicals and sugar, but the government is encouraging. They're saying this is healthy for you to feed to your children. You got to understand that these agencies are all corrupted by the money, not only in these food and chemical companies, but the pharmaceutical industry. Healthy people we haven't been to doctors in decades. We don't go to doctors. We just don't go. We haven't been to doctors in like 40 or 50 years. So that's the worst thing for these companies. Because we don't eat that food and we don't buy those products. We read the labels and we make sure that the space of love that we're living in doesn't have toxic chemicals in the fat, in the laundry detergent, or in the food, or in any of the things that we're wearing, in the clothes. We got to remember our skin absolutely
is an organ.
It's totally permeable. Whatever you put on your skin goes right into your bloodstream. And so clothes even go into your bloodstream. And we sometimes we're hiking, right? Tell them what happened, right?
Oh, sometimes it's like it's so terrible because these laundry detergents, they smell so amazingly over the top. I mean, we can smell when somebody comes with a t-shirt just freshly washed from many feet away. It's like it's just polluting the earth. And this all goes into the skin, all these chemicals we ingest. And so it's really not good. And there are so many skin problems, all kinds of different, we know it all. And so it's much better to, much better not to consume that. And also the birds die, the fish die, because they can't live with these chemicals. So we should take good care about.
Right. Yeah, that's I think all these things are like interconnected. So the whole idea is, it's not to be judgmental or anything. It's just to understand there's a system in place where money is made on disease, right? I mean, that's where the money is. That's massive money. You want these corporations, which are interconnected, and the banks are in the background making the loans. So the whole thing, and they've taken over the political system. So we have to just understand that the money is in chronic illness. That's where the big money is. So we have to be proactive. We can't just go and say, well, my doctor recommended this. The doctor's been educated by a system, and most of the doctors have not questioned things. So that's why we never ask doctors anything. We do our own research. We should just do our own research. and create a space of love that's based on purity. Really, I think that's the thing, purity, and of without added chemicals, because these over something like 90 or 100,000 different chemicals that are used for all kinds, for pesticide, herbicides, and all kinds of things, and they're not there. So our body is always cleansing. That the good old body is always cleansing. So just to give our body a chance to do that, and also to remember that if we get symptoms, this is, I think, an important point. If we have like a sore throat, a runny nose, a headache, diarrhea, a rash, all these things, like we're sick, right? Oh, I'm sick. And we always say, that's bad. That's a terrible thing. I'm sick. I don't feel well. That's good. Really, your body is cleansing. You want that to happen. And one of the worst mistakes people make is when the body starts cleansing and they get a runny nose and a sore throat and a fever and a headache. And I always get a headache. I can guarantee I will get a headache if I go to a restaurant, which we don't do anymore. But in the old days, I'd go to a restaurant, because we don't go to restaurants unless they're totally organic. But I would say, no MSG, please. I don't want any MSG. MSG is a flavor enhancer, as you all know, that's really pervasive, especially in Asian cuisine. And they'd say, oh, no MSG. Okay. And if I always get a headache. I mean, my left eye right behind it hurts if there's any MSG. I know it for sure. And so that's my body cleansing the toxin of that chemical. And so I shouldn't say, oh, it's terrible that I got a headache. I say, I'm glad I'm getting this because it's a cleansing. And so we should really be careful of the impulse to then go to and get some kind of a pharmaceutical something to stop the cleansing, to suppress the symptoms. Right? We want to suppress the symptoms, make it go away. All that does is drive the toxins deeper into our system, and then cancer, and then autoimmune disease. I mean, all kinds of much worse things. So let yourself cleanse. It's the same thing. Like when we do cleaning around the house, it gets worse for a while, right? There's dust and everything everywhere. So it gets worse for a while, but in the long run, it gets better. So I think we have to understand those basic ideas of the mirror between the inner and the outer. These are really the key things. Do you want to say anything more about all that, or
no? I think maybe.
Okay, let's talk. Well, I want to talk a little bit about comfort, because I think that's an important thing. We sort of touched on that, but we got away. But I think, one of the things that we have noticed, like living in an RV, for example, it was difficult to modulate the temperature, because the walls are so thin. If it's hot outside, it's going to be hot inside. If it's cold outside, it's going to be cold inside. And most people think that's terrible. We want to set the thermostat and have it be at a certain temperature so we're comfortable all the time. But what does that really do to our physiology? It's not how people lived. And we think in the past of how people lived, and we think, oh, that must have been miserable. They didn't have a thermostat they could set. They didn't have hot and cold running water. They didn't have all these wonderful things that make life so much more comfortable. And I have to say, if I read some of these ancient texts in the Buddhist tradition or Christian tradition or the Hindu tradition, people wrote hundreds or thousands of years ago. There's the most profound, amazing, deep wisdom, and people living lives of incredible joy and happiness and harmony and wisdom, even without hot and cold running water and a thermostat, right? I mean, how is that possible? They're so happy and they're so awake. I mean, so, and then you look at us with all of our comfort and the amount of drugs. I mean, it's mind boggling. As someone, we're like, I'm 69, and people my age are usually on at least 4 or 5 medications, for goodness sakes. I mean, we've never taken anything, but that's the situation. We want to be comfortable, and yet we're drugging ourselves to be, as a consequence of that, with toxic chemicals, and giving a lot of profits to these corporations, which then with their money, they capture the media, they capture the conversation. So we read the New York Times, or we read New Yorker magazine or Vanity Fair, whatever. The media in general has been completely captured. So where do you find real truth? Where do you find something that really supports you in your life? Not from the mainstream media. You have to come to Charles Betterton's
Yeah.
special presentation here and get alternative perspectives that have, from my point of view, a lot more validity, because it's really being uncomfortable can actually make the body much stronger. There's quite a bit of interest right now lately. Maybe you haven't heard about it, but there's a guy named Wim Hof who talks about, he's called the Iceman. He talks about the benefits of getting into cold water and the benefits of breathing deeply. And this is nothing new. I mean, it's like, well, this new thing, it's ancient. I mean, I live in a Tibetan Buddhist center. It's called Tumo. It's cultivating the inner psychic heat. And hundreds of years ago in Tibet, they mastered this. They would go into the freezing cold water, and then they would have competitions who could dry the cotton robe more quickly in the bitter cold, right? By generating psychic heat, which is bodily heat. The whole idea is that you can do meditation practices that'll ensure that you're warm all the time, or that you're cool all the time, even if it's hot. All these kinds of things. I mean, our capacities are fantastic, what we have in terms of our physiology and our mentality, to send communication, to intuitively communicate, for example, with animals, or with each other, or with nature. But we rely on our cell phone to do all that. We rely on these, on matter. We rely on these mechanical things, and we think they're so great, but we pay a big price. We lose our ability to intuitively communicate or to modulate our temperature. We live in a place, we haven't run our air conditioner in years here, even when it's 110. And we do run a little space heaters, but we don't have a thermostat. So
we have one, but
most people, it's
it.
hard to get them to come over to our house in the winter, because they're just like, it's too cold for them. But we feel that if our body learns to be happy in a wide range of situations, that creates a more vitality. It's an example of more vitality. It's so interesting. Like, I remember reading how when the sailors from Portugal sailed down years ago, like in the 1500s, around the Cape Horn, around the tip of South America, and it was so cold, they were freezing. There was ice, icebergs in the water, and there was ice everywhere on the land, and they were like freezing cold. It was so incredibly cold. And they looked over and they saw the native Indians swimming in the ocean. And it's like, people, we have to understand that if we're raised, however we're raised, if we're raised in a cold environment, where that's what they do, we're going to learn to do it, right? If we're raised to have to be uncomfortable, if the thermostat goes within 2 degrees, that's how we're going to be, right? We are like little sponges. We soak up all the attitudes, all the realities, everything of our society. It becomes real. It becomes absolute the way it is, and our body will believe. If we believe it, our body will manifest it. It's really true. It's called the placebo effect, or the nocebo effect, right? I mean, if I believe something's going to really hurt me, it'll probably hurt me. If I believe something's really going to help me, it'll probably help me. So the mind is the greatest power we have. And I think to remember that when we're talking about creating this shelter, right? This safe space, or this space of love, and to let the shelter be permeable, right? Let in the sun. I mean, Madeleine spends, I would say, what percentage of time do you spend outside, you think, every day?
I think 2/3 of my life, sure.
She's outside. I mean, she's always outside. Yeah. She's on the deck. She's hardly ever in here. I'm in here because I'm more on the computer, but but we all go out. It's really important to get outside, really important to get into nature, and have a permeable shelter. Try to have a shelter that's not like with big walls and like I'm in here. And I mean, it's nice. I know when it's thunder and lightning and raining, it's nice to have a little, separation from that. But in general, letting the air in. I mean, she's always got the windows open. Even in the middle of the winter, she opens the window. That's what they do in Switzerland. You got to turn over the air. Turn over the air. I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
Turn over the air.
Turn once an hour.
So
you have to turn over the air. Otherwise, you breathe your old air in.
Right.
It's like it's not invigorating. So we
Well-
have to be alert, awake, and happy and loving. And so how to do that with old air, with being inside?
It's
and,
true.
you know.
I mean, I have to say, I lived for 3 years in a Volkswagen bus, and then we lived in an RV. Every once in a while, people would let us stay in their, in their guest room or something. And a lot of times I couldn't hardly tolerate it because they had the heater running, the heat. And so we're like trying to close all the heat registers and open the windows and get, it's like really and then they have these fragrance things spewing this toxic fragrance into the air. So now when people say you can stay in our guest room, we say, no, we'll stay in our we have a little micro van. We stay in that because we know it's all organic cotton and linen, and there's no fragrances and there's no EMF fields. I mean, it's, EMF fields, another thing. I mean,
Yeah.
you really need to be aware of EMF fields and be aware of your water. I mean, and air. I mean, there's so much to talk about, actually.
Yeah.
How are we doing? We're getting short on time. Yeah, I did want to mention, I do want to talk about water and air, but if you want, we do have this CD called World Peace Meditations, and another one called the Four Bahars Meditation. And so the key to a lot of what we're saying is, besides just understanding some of these principles, it's really taking time every day to be in silence and then to contemplate deeper truths and contemplate the connection that we have with the infinite source of life, to give thanks throughout the day, and especially in the morning, to kind of set that for this precious opportunity of a human life, and for the opportunity to share and to learn and to give and to grow and to contribute, and let that be the foundation of our life. So we created this World Peace Meditation with music and words. We did some of this last time, and last time we did relationships, earth healing, and joy and gratitude, I think, and abundance. But we have other ones on animals, world peace, and so forth. But there's different topics that you can just let yourself get beyond being a thing to being the source of your life, and that makes all the difference. Madeleine.
And you can listen this also in the evening, of course. And what I like to say with this, to turn off all your electronics a half an hour before you go to bed, and kind of wind down and get ready for a good sleep. I mean, I think it's an hour is better, but at least half an hour. And you will see the difference of your sleep. Don't just work and work till, or play or whatever you do on the computer, till you drop into bed and unconsciously go to sleep, and you for sure won't have a really great sleep. So we don't know what a good sleep is usually till we experience it.
There's so much more. I mean, I'm like lost in thoughts here. I just want to mention, we do have lots of different CDs of uplifting music. Music and art
Here, this one.
are so important.
This one has piano and flute. I played the
Right.
flute on here. It's really sweet and very nice to listen to and wind down.
Yeah, Madeleine is an artist, watercolor painting, and you can see one of the paintings up there. Maybe
Yeah.
they're all around. Yeah, we've got a book of them.
Right.
But the whole
Let's see.
Not a dog there.
Yeah.
Yeah, the whole idea, really, I want to bring forth, that's so important, is that we're talking about creating a space of healing, right? A space of love, a space of healing, and living in that space of healing.
Mhm.
That means a space of beauty. And I'm so grateful to be in a relationship with a partner of this being over here, because she just has a feeling for beauty, and it's really inspiring. Just creating everything everywhere is neat, not only neat and orderly, but there's these little splashes of beauty everywhere. And the whole idea is, think Gandhi said it. He said, you can do little things, but you can do them with great love. Whoever said that. The idea is that we just, in our life, what do we do really? I mean, we're doing little things all the time. And there's another saying that the way we do one thing is the way we do everything.
Mhm.
So if we can become mindful and do the little things in our life with love and with an eye for beauty, and putting flower arrangements around and beautiful art and arranging things and changing things around, all of these things create a space of love. And Madeleine, I can tell you, it's really important in the bedroom. That's the holy of holies, and because that's where we spend a lot of time, and it's a very healing place. And so, like, she had to move the bed about 8 times to get it lined up, north, south, east, west, this, that, the other, whatever. To be aware of energy just for yourself. I mean, be aware if you're having trouble sleeping, maybe move the bed. I mean, the head shouldn't be to the north anyway. So kind of get a sense of creating a really like dark. It should be totally dark. And there shouldn't be any, I mean, ideally it should be really a place of beauty and quiet and dark, so your body can just really relax, and with no EMFs. One thing, I mean, I'll just say, there's a company called Fresh and Alive based in Florida, and we know the guy who actually started the company. He's a very, very high integrity, great guy, actually, a longtime vegan. And he creates a whole line of EMF field dispersers. And the main one is the home shield. So we have a home shield in our garden, and it creates a scalar wave, which goes, I mean, it's scalar, so it's a non-material wave, but it helps to harmonize EMF fields, because there are EMF fields around us all the time, from the cell phone towers and also from our own Wi-Fi routers and all that stuff, and cell phones and all that. So that harmonizes it so that it doesn't hurt us as much. And also it creates a wave that disperses the chemtrails in the sky, which are really a big issue. I mean, if you look up, you'll see these geoengineering. It's called solar radiation management, but it's to block the sun because of what they call global warming. But the whole idea is that it's barium, strontium, and aluminum and other toxic metals that are not good for you. So these the home shield disperses it for, what is it? I think
70.
70, yes, a radius of 75 miles.
So and
150, diameter. So you can really start healing your area of the world by putting one of these in your garden or in your yard. Not only for your own, it'll do like 100-foot radius for the EMF fields, but it does also disperses chemtrails, which I think are very damaging. So you can also get what's called a rest shield, which is a small one just for inside your house. But the home shield does your whole house, the whole yard, does a few neighbors too. You can bless your neighbors. It just creates a harmonious field. So these are some things. There's also lots of other companies that make EMF blocking fabric and so forth. We're really more and more living, especially if you're in an urban area, these rollouts, it's causing a lot of problems with people, because our body is electrical. Everything's electrical, bioelectrical. So be aware of that, creating a space of love. Try to get out into the country if you can, that's better. And then we should talk a little bit about water. So water, have a good water purifier, right? I mean, whatever, they have ones now that take out everything, like not only all the heavy metals, PCBs, dioxin, all that stuff, but all the pharmaceuticals that end up in the water. If you don't have your own well, And fluoride, you need to take out fluoride because fluoride blocks the third eye, the pineal gland. Yeah, so calcifies it, and that's our connection with our spirituality and with intuition. So really important to have good water. And besides that, we also have something that structurizes the water. We, on the outside, like all the water that comes onto our land goes through a structurizing. So you can there's a company called Natural Technologies that makes these. And basically what that is that water is life, right? I mean, you got to understand, we're living in a very artificial world of artificial spaces and light and color and everything. And so the kind of shelter we're talking about, we try to remove some of that artificiality and you can live outside right in nature without anything. That'd be the best, really. But if you're going to have water piped in as water goes through the pipes, the friction going over many meters and yards, whatever, it just takes it makes all the electrons just line up, so the water is pretty unavailable. I mean, it's not easily absorbable by us or by plants. So you put it through a structurizer, it just swirls the water around like woo, and it's like going like a stream or a lake. The water's alive. And so we found it's true. When we use that, the plants don't need as much water in the garden. They're getting water that's more alive, and we have it coming into the house. And now you even have a little thing, right, that we do every.
Oh yeah,
when we're traveling.
When we travel, there is a travel device, but it's also much more acceptable by the cells. It's the water, so it's really it's easy for the body to absorb, and you don't feel that thirsty anymore because it doesn't just go through your body and brings with it all your very precious minerals and trace minerals,
so you don't
and
have
all that.
You don't have to drink as much when the water's alive. It's just more easily absorbable. So I think it's just good to know about a few of these things, like mattresses, right? I mean, there's have a good quality, like latex, which is natural rubber. This is what we use. But all these things are really important, and the clothing, the cloth, the air, air, just fresh air. And if you have a place where there's pollution, get an air doctor. That's called an air doctor. We don't usually need it here unless there's a fire in the area. We live in Northern California. That sometimes happens. But again, you're breathing literally hundreds of thousands of times more than we eat or drink, right? I mean, making sure your air is really clean. Well, that's one of the reasons we moved to Lake County, because it actually is #1 in the whole United States for the cleanest air. And so we're very blessed. But also, I really recommend it. Being outside for your shower. Like, we haven't taken a shower inside our house in probably, I don't know, 8 years. So we just put an outside shower and just have a shower outside. And so we're taking a shower into the stars or the sun or whatever, and then the water goes into the garden, right, or just runs off into a plant. But try to do things outside if possible. Whatever you can do outside. And take off your shoes. Try to connect with the earth. It's a really good idea. It's called earthing. There's so many different aspects to this, but the idea is to grow your food, integrate everything, recycle everything, all your food scraps and your liquid rain and liquid gold and all that, but also bring the love that you have for your own life into the garden and let that feed. And then if you have a little extra, you can give it to your friends and neighbors. Go to farmers markets to get your groceries as much as possible of other things, or buy organic. Explore veganic if you can, which is the best without exploiting animals at all. And just basically understand underlying everything, that the shelter really is of this physical body, right? We're consciousness, and so this is sort of it. And then this makes another shelter. So we already get two if we're inside something. But it's the being, that what we are is eternal and undamageable. It was never born and will never die. And we're just functioning through this vehicle for a few short decades. And why are we here? And that's really the essential question. What's the purpose?
Yeah.
What is our purpose? And I think when we connect with our purpose, then we know what kind of shelter, what kind of life, how we can bring forth beauty and compassion and kindness for other beings, that we're all interconnected. And that's what we love about our space here, is that we really try to feed all the different creatures, the squirrels and the birds and everybody. So we're all connected. Uh-oh, Charles is coming.
Yeah.
We're at the end of our time.
Yeah.
Well, I
Where did the
jumped
time
in
go?
there. I'm so grateful. Over my bed, I have a Madeleine Tuttle original that I bought the day
Oh.
we met for the Unity Church in Indianapolis, I think.
Yeah.
My home is filled with beautiful images that Madeleine has graced us with for some of our publications that Leslie and I produce, even our daily newsletters from Planet Blessed. I have a stack of the CDs, love the Will Tuttle CDs, and we're a distributor of structured water. I met Clayton Nolte in Sedona, which is where you probably
Oh,
found.
right.
So
Yeah.
I put some of those links in the chat. If you
Okay.
came looking to get your questions answered, to have comments, yes, we've run out of time and energy, but I put Will's URL in the chat. Leo Jacoby, who's Mr. Resourcefulness, probably put a couple of dozen links down in there, so you'll be able to stay in touch
Wonderful.
with Madeleine. So thank you very much. It's been very stimulating. I learned a lot. I took some notes. Very grateful for the opportunity. I've only known you for 25 years so far. Looking forward to getting caught up. So thank you all for joining us today. Stay tuned. World Peace Diet. Will was one of the plenary presenters for the Vitalizing Food presentation. It was fascinating to see with Elizabeth. The
Right.
conversation
Yeah, we're so glad and grateful to this whole Peace Week, and to
Yeah.
your efforts with the Mindful Blessisms, Charles. And yeah, please stay in touch, everyone. You can go to our website, it's just worldpeacediet.com or willtuttle.com. You see Madeleine's art and music, our lecture schedule, where we're going to be, and her intuitive cooking, intuitive kitchen videos.
And you can see the garden, and you can watch some morning concerts we do together. So
right, yeah.
Just go.
I feel so inspired. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank
Leslie.
you.
Yeah,
Thanks, Leslie. Yes.
Right.
And when you're ready for naturally balanced structured water, we'll be happy to offer the best possible discount. So the link is in the chat.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Thank you,
That's
Charles.
right.
Wonderful.
Blessings all. Peace Week runs
right.
through the 24th. There's a lot of other programs. Please join us. And thank you for being here today. Thank you, Will. Thank you, Madeleine.
Great.
Thank you,
you.
Charles. Thank
Yeah.
you, everybody.